Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It's Wednesday, October 17th, 2018. My name is Michael Brooks on a Michael Wednesday, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On today's program, Tina Vasquez. She's a senior immigration reporter for Rewire.News, and she has a piece, Abolish ICE, Beyond a Slogan. We're talking about the history of ICE. Where does it come from? What would an actual humane alternative look like with regards to immigration, and how can we actually get rid of this terrorist agency? Mike Pompeo is in Saudi Arabia because there's a mystery to uncover. Who killed Jamal Khashoggi?
Who done it?
Who done it? It's a classic who done it. We really have no idea.
It's like strangers on a train over there.
Murder on the Middle Eastern Express.
Except, wow, it's the Orient Express. Doesn't that work?
Murder on the Arabian Express.
Saudi Arabia times a $100 million gift to U.S. efforts to stabilize Syria, quote-unquote stabilize Syria, nicely synchronized with the Pompeo visit. McConnell eyes cuts to Medicare and Social Security to address the deficit as the next cycle of the right-wing game plays itself out, and you need to go out and vote in 2018, only weeks away. Brian Kemp continues to purge and attack voters across the board in Georgia, but protesters, activists, and the very effective, very smart Stacey Abrams campaign is fighting back. The White House looks to replace Ryan Zinke, the Interior Secretary, who is getting investigated. Is this another guy that didn't give Trump his cut?
He's got a history of this already.
He definitely has a history of this.
Also lied about being able to fly fish, apparently.
Really?
Yeah, which is, I mean, I don't know why he still has a career in Montana politics, but whatever.
Well, I know why he still has a career in Republican politics. Defrauded students win a class action certification in a lawsuit against DeVos. Great news for students and America. Alaska's lieutenant governor resigns after some, what he calls, inappropriate remarks. We'll get to that. Jair Bolsonaro has a strong lead in the polls as fascism surges in Brazil, with the strategic guidance of Steve Bannon and the total collapse and breaking of the centrist political class in Brazil to fascism, as Lula da Silva remains gagged in prison by the Brazilian Supreme Court. We could be on the verge of the largest famine in the world in 100 years because of the Saudi UAE U.S. war on Yemen. And getting back to basics, Canada makes marijuana legal. I'm thinking of one song contributor there.
Finally, Canadians will chill out a little bit.
Finally, Canadians can relax And I guess, well, this is in the packet. Some guy who owned a brothel in Nevada who liked Trump died. Okay. Goodbye, guy. We hardly knew ye, nor particularly cared. And Christian Services, Bethany Christian Services is fostering migrant kids. It also has a coercive history of adoptions. All that and more on today's Majority Report. Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, who looks like a creation from the Koch brothers labs, sort of, we say like corn syrup come to life. He's a extraordinarily extremist far-right figure, Koch-backed guy, you know, like pretty much all of them are. But it's just important to note that when even this guy, this sort of, you know, extremist house guy has ascended to the heights.
When you come from the Koch brothers house district and then you're put in the positions of power that Pompeo is, it's time to get concerned a little bit.
Yeah. But of course, I'm sure the Kochs are super concerned about the Trump administration because they deplore racism, say. It's not like I've been funding racist, literally discriminatory efforts for decades, going back to James Buchanan, say. I really don't like the racism. Anytime a libertarian tells you they don't like the racism, say, you're not very bright.
Do you like inheritances from the racism times?
Right. Do you like the idea of doing anything about the racism? Do you support policies that codify it?
How about the structures the racism put in place?
They're the structures that feed the racism.
Well, that's not a thought experiment. None of that is thought experiment-based thinking, which is where liberty comes from. Mike Pompeo is in Saudi Arabia because, of course, we have a classic whodunit on our hands. We do know, and we have known for years, both the Obama administration and the Trump administration, whodunit in terms of mass murder in Yemen, and it's also us. We're accomplices in the crime. But whodunit of the interrogation and murder of Jamal Khashoggi. So here's what we know. It's important to re-review this because this isn't just taking Turkish reports at face value. This is, we have CCTV footage of Jamal Khashoggi goes into the Saudi embassy, the Saudi consulate, and doesn't leave. And then we have the surveillance footage of that team that came from Saudi, including a DNA expert. So that's what we know. Supposedly the Saudis have been preparing, and they're putting out the story that this was an interrogation gone wrong, which
like a Coen Brothers situation.
Right. It was a very Coen Brothers situation. And I mean, I guess in the strict, like, they're pretty much they're like, yeah, we tortured him and we're interrogating him. We were going to abduct him, and then I guess somebody got a little overly frisky and murdered him.
See, I told you there was an innocent explanation.
I told you there was an innocent explanation. They're obviously, literally right now as we speak, if they haven't decided already, figuring out who's expendable here. And no doubt MBS felt comfortable doing this in the context of a Trump presidency. Donald Trump calls the press the enemy of the people all the time. MBS is just following his lead. But here's Mike Pompeo in Saudi Arabia, and there's an interesting accidental word choice in this clip, but of course you can tell as representative of the Trump team, they're really serious about getting to the bottom of the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
Sir, did they tell you what happened to Jamal Khashoggi?
Told me they were going to conduct a thorough, complete, transparent investigation. They made a commitment to hold anyone connected to any wrongdoing that may be found accountable for that, whether they are a senior officer or official. They promised accountability for each of those persons whom they determine as a result of their investigation deserves accountability.
Including a member of the royal family?
They made no exceptions to who they would hold accountable. They were very clear. They understand the importance of this issue.
That was implied.
They're determined to get to the bottom of it, and that they will conduct the report, and we'll all get a chance to see it. They each promised that they would achieve that for us.
And did they say that Mr. Khashoggi is alive or dead?
I don't want to talk about any of the facts. They didn't want to either, in that they want to have the opportunity to complete this investigation in a thorough way. And I think that's I think that's a reasonable thing to do to give them that opportunity, and then we'll all get to judge.
Right. So they want an opportunity to figure out what their cover story is for the abduction and murder of this guy, the detention of him in a consulate. And I will say, given MBS's record and his moves against rival members of the royal family, I would not be surprised if he feels comfortable with other members of the royal family being held accountable for this. I would definitely chalk that as extremely plausible that MBS could probably think of several cousins that he would be down with pinning this on. The trouble is, for him, in terms of covering this up, is that Jamal Khashoggi and other people on the Hill in Washington had connections to other members of the royal family who were rivals of this guy. So that might be hard to do that. But
MBS says, I don't control these guys.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that was Gavin McInnes.
Right, exactly. Like, we started it. It's a thing that's called the monarchy. Started it hundreds of years ago. It's like a club. And we have the royal sites. And but, if people kill blasphemers, I don't, that's just my army and intelligence service. I don't run them. I'm a reformer. This is a picture of Mike Pompeo and MBS. This is about their fourth date. And they are, I will say, MBS really does. He's got a winning smile.
I can't tell who has more butterflies in their stomach.
Yeah. I like how,
Caught in a red bromance.
I love how, the Saudis are, the only Muslims that these guys don't hate. They're like, we would be completely loathe Muslims, period. But just the Saudi monarchy, man. They're good guys.
They're great. Someone pointed out to me the other day that MBS is a millennial.
Mm-hmm. He's only 33 or 34.
Which makes sense because millennials do tend to murder things and people. Right?
What?
Oh my God.
They'd be killing.
They'd be killing it.
Well,
millennials are killing journalists.
They also murdered Joe Crowley's career, apparently. That's what he said. But this is the sound I hear when I see this picture. Do you want to go to the picture just quickly, Brendan?
Yeah.
That's copyright.
Just 3 seconds, but you get the joke.
I like this. That is I like how they really are. They're like, no, we're not even gonna do. Let's not even pretend to have. Let's not even pretend to have the photo op where I look gravely concerned about you torturing, murdering, and dismembering. I mean, I'm sorry. And if kids are listening, and they probably already shouldn't have been listening to this if they're really young, but let's just outline that for a second. The Turkish police version of this story, which they have the video surveillance evidence, which everybody sees, supports this, as well as the testimony of Jamal Khashoggi's former fiance, who has been very brave and aggressive on this, is that he walks into the consulate, is detained, tortured, murdered, and then cut up into pieces and driven out in a van. I mean, I'm not trying to put too far. I mean, I guess on some level, to kill somebody is to kill somebody, but
premeditation.
That is a rat in a fucking consulate. That's where, people go to update their friggin' passport pictures. I mean, he was going there to basically just take care of some domestic business because he was getting remarried. And they tortured him and they chopped his body up. I mean, I'm not even going to do a movie analogy because it actually is tasteless. That's literally what they did. And this is the outcome of that. It's hey, man, how's it going? It's impunity. That's global authoritarianism. That is the Trump era.
Typical millennial entitlement.
He's really trying to turn this into a millennial bit.
Millennial bin Salman.
Millennials. Mom, Mom, why can't I kill Jamal Khashoggi? Dad has killed all the dissidents. There is no dissidents for me to kill. Why did the baby boomers kill all the dissidents? There wasn't an opportunity for us to kill the dissidents. Well, as Thomas Friedman would say, he had a dark side. including millennial entitlement.
And some balls, as Thomas Friedman would also say.
Yeah, and if you're willing to have the balls to chop up Jamal Khashoggi, you know what? Fuck it.
If you have a New York Times subscription, cancel it, folks.
Indeed. Support something that needs support and is actual resistance. One of today's sponsors, or today's sponsor, is newsvoice.com/majority. We all know, and actually perfectly apropos with what Matt's talking about, we live in an era of high media concentration, monopolies, and bubbles where people only consume news from very narrow sources which either fit pre-existing narratives that they already have or don't challenge bigger narratives that the conglomerates have. It's important and smart and wise to have a high-quality, diverse range of news analysis and opinion. And there's a new company that's come up with their own response to these problems. It's called News Voice. It's an app for iOS and Android, which you can access for free if you go to newsvoice.com/majority, and it gives you a personalized news feed by aggregating a mix of mainstream media sources, international sources, and independent media sources. A big part of my process for both shows I do is a lot of international news sources. And I know that people know that I pay attention to international stories, so that's part of it. But I also like to read and watch how, as an example, I don't know, say France 24 is talking about elections here, talking about dynamics here. They have sometimes analysts from the United States that don't go on the cable networks that are actually really good become guests for this show, as an example. Multiple sources are provided for each news story. The entire app is fueled by crowdsourcing. You can upvote stories you think are important so more people will see them. You can add stories to the app. You can add a source that's missing for a story. It's meant to be completely open and democratized news aggregator that lets you get every side of every story. They also have video interview series featuring guests from Chris Hedges to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Go download the app for free at newsvoice.com/majority. We've put a link under this video if you're watching on YouTube. We're going to take a brief break, and we will be right back with Tina Vasquez. We're talking about how to get rid of ICE.
By the way, I just want to say we got DJ Danarchy on the music
today.
Yes,
yes, indeed. DJ Danarchy gave us a slew of fresh beats for MR and TMBS. He is a gem. Danarchy, set up a Patreon so we can all support you. Thanks, brother.
I was simply trying to fix the culture in many ways.
We were a superpower. We are now a hyper-powered.
Ask the moms.
You have a wonderful day, bro, and I'll see you again soon.
Welcome back to the Majority Report. Michael Brooks here. Joining us now is Tina Vasquez. She is a senior immigration reporter at Rewire.News. Tina, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Tina, you have a new piece out called Abolish ICE, Beyond the Slogan. Before we get to how we actually abolish this monstrosity, can you go back and give us a history of ICE? Does ICE go back to the founding of this country?
It doesn't, which is maybe, well, at least that's the argument of the advocates that want to abolish ICE, is that it's doable because it's not like an agency like Border Patrol, which has been around since the 1920s. ICE was created in 2003 as part of the Department of Homeland Security, and it was created right after the September 11th terrorist attacks. Mm-hmm. And so immediately you saw this sort of conflating of immigration with terrorism. And in the beginning, at least, ICE really impacted Muslim immigrant communities in unprecedented ways. And now you're seeing sort of similar tactics being applied to immigrants of all kinds, including Central American immigrants, Mexican immigrants. You have these narratives about them being rapists and drug dealers and violent gang members and criminals. So that conflating of immigration with bad stuff has kind of been how ICE has always operated. But yeah, it's only a 15-year-old agency.
How did ICE ramp itself up? I think it's important to lay this history out because there's no doubt that there's a departure and acceleration under Trump, and people who would draw a false equivalency between Trump and Obama as an example, that's just inaccurate. At the same time, obviously it was created under Bush in the context of counterterrorism, and that's a really dangerous thing to merge and equate immigration writ large and terrorism specifically. And then under, as the Bush years progressed, and then under Obama, ICE became an incredibly aggressive and really ruthless, almost like kind of paramilitary mindset agency. How did that happen?
I mean, I think it really has to do with funding. Mm-hmm. I mean, there are multiple instances in which you see ICE asking for far beyond what they budgeted, and Congress gives them the money just about every time. So they have these resources to detain and deport people in unprecedented numbers. And there's really not a series of checks and balances for ICE. There are multiple instances, like even when something as egregious as sexual assault happens in an ICE detention center, it's basically ICE investigating itself. So this is an agency that has unprecedented funding, that moves to quickly hire people at reduced standards. And then with the Obama administration in particular, you see ICE basically get militarized, and that's often tied to, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So you'll have something like DACA roll out, and it's almost like to appease Republicans or people in opposition to doing anything for immigrant communities. You'll see administrations then feel the need to ramp up immigration enforcement if they're going to give a small percentage of immigrant communities anything like DACA. Then that came with increased border enforcement. It came with more ICE agents. It came with an uptick in things like ICE raids. So it's like a tit for tat kind of thing. If there's any sort of advancement for immigrant communities, you see huge increases in financial support for ICE, which just lets them carry out the kind of enforcement that we're seeing now.
So I want you to talk specifically about what concretely the shifts from Obama to Trump have been in terms of the aggressiveness of ICE. And I'm asking that specifically because I think that, and tell me whether this is true or not, because obviously you know more than I do, but my read on it is there's many, many things to criticize Obama about with regards to ICE and immigration writ large, from the militarization of ICE to amping up deportations and so on. And like you said, it was sort of in the context of both trying to appease Republicans who will never be appeased. They'll always say that Obama's a, Maoist, Muslim, whatever, who wants open borders no matter what he does, right? And then at the same time to sort of like make a deal. Because generically, if you poll this, most people, I think, not knowing much specifics, but if you ask most people, including even I think actually majority of Republicans, they're like, yeah, increase enforcement, but provide a path for citizenship for people who are already here. That's kind of roughly popular. And that's what Obama was actually doing or attempting to do. So he also did DACA on the positive side. He also was sort of like looking to make a deal. To with Trump, it seems to me not only is it, I mean, first and foremost, humanitarian catastrophe, but it's like a strategic white supremacy. It's part of a broader effort, whether we're talking about voter suppression or other issues, to try to engineer an electorate that can favor a predominant, like basically white identity politics party. So first, like, does that read make sense to you? And then specifically, how has it jumped? Like, what have the changes been under Trump from Obama? Like, even in like the real nuances.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense to me. I think that's certainly the case. I mean, something that we unpack in the article is that, like, I think asylum seekers are a very good example of the shift that you're seeing between the two administrations. Whereas under the Obama administration, we did see horrible things like family detention was brought back. We saw really horrible treatment of asylum seekers. So, when family units migrated, they were then put in detention together. And that was brought back under the Obama administration. But the really important context that we unpack in the article is that the Obama administration was responding to a humanitarian crisis at the border, meaning that our immigration system was not prepared to handle the number of people migrating to the U.S. seeking asylum from Central America. The Trump administration created a humanitarian crisis at the border by separating families and basically disappearing children into a system, deporting their parents, and having no mechanism in place for them to be reunited. So that's one example. But under the Obama administration, you did see, I think, sincere moves to help immigrant communities. It was an administration that was in a really tough place. There wasn't a lot that could be done for comprehensive immigration reform. I think that was discussed throughout Obama's 8 years. But then you have the Trump administration, which is just overtly racist, overtly anti-immigrant. And everything that we're seeing under this administration is specifically to limit the number of people who can migrate to the U.S., especially Black and brown immigrants, and to expel as many Black and brown immigrants as humanly possible. Like, this is just a clamp down on the system. And you see all of the federal immigration agencies working together in a way that, in my years doing immigration reporting, for example, I've not really seen USCIS participate in immigration enforcement. But under this administration, with an appointee like Cisna that was appointed by Trump, you see, like, they're not calling it a denaturalization task force, but you're seeing a concerted effort to denaturalize people who have been here for many years and for minor offenses. And I think those are the most marked shifts, where the immigration system under Obama wasn't operating well, and a lot of people were being deported. And I think it was a person who didn't know how to handle it, or there weren't the correct systems in place in order to help more immigrant communities. But the Trump administration has no desire to help immigrant communities. They want to expel them and keep them from coming here. Absolutely.
So in the piece, you start by taking us back to 2013 and a group called a woman named Marissa Franco and a group called the National Day Laboring Organization. And they started something, the hashtag Not One More campaign, which, if I'm reading you correctly, sort of like that's the sort of precursor of Abolish ICE. Can you take us specific, because that will parallel what you were already talking about, but that history basically on the other side of this equation, which is of activist organizations who actually care about the human dimension, the actual dimension of these issues, when their shift sort of pivoted to ending deportations and dealing also specifically with the crimes of Joe Arpaio versus a sort of congressional process?
So, yeah, we decided to start with Marissa Franco. She's now with Mi Gente, and that's the organization that we profile pretty prominently in the piece, because they've released a pretty thorough platform of what abolishing ICE looks like to them. But in 2013, Marissa Franco was behind the Not One More campaign. So it was like a coalition of different organizations, and their entire goal was to stop the Obama administration from deporting any more immigrants. And we start there because Marissa then goes on to be the executive director of Mi Gente, and now they've released this platform for abolishing ICE. Idea where she was coming from in Arizona, there was SB 1070 under Joe Arpaio, and it was one of the most anti-immigrant laws in the country that basically allowed for racial profiling. And so they were fighting Arpaio, but then nationally they were also trying to stop deportations under the Obama administration largely also. So you have that kind of mindset now with Mi Gente, where they're being told to wait until Trump leaves office. They're being told to wait for some sort of congressional intervention. And to them, that doesn't seem feasible. And so the agency that is responsible for carrying out deportations is ICE. So they tried to stop deportations in 2013, and this is kind of just a continuation of the same thing.
What's their plan? Let's outline it. And then we'll get to ICE's response and how Republicans are trying to leverage this. But the kind of meat of it, like what are they actually proposing, and what does it concretely look like to abolish ICE and really fundamentally reset what immigration policy is all about?
I mean, I can't remember how many pages is it. It's pretty thorough, but it starts with, they want to see the removal of Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Mm-hmm. They want to repeal laws that criminalize migration. So specifically, they talk about laws that were passed in 1996 that led to more immigrants being detained and for longer periods of time. They want to end all forms of detention. And then they want to halt things like Operation Streamline, which is, you see, like now you're seeing images under the Trump administration zero tolerance policy of like courtrooms filled with a bunch of immigrants, and it's like one hearing for a bunch of people. Operation Streamline has been doing that for a really long time. So it's criminal prosecution of immigrants. It's very rapid processing of their cases, so there is no due process. And it's basically trying to get people deported as quickly as possible. So those are kind of the major pillars of their platform.
And do they have a relationship or a sense of sort of building bridge? I mean, because first and foremost, I like that approach, and it's true. It's an activist action. It needs to take place even in the worst of circumstances, obviously. But is there a sense that at least, people on the left, whether they're Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who you mentioned in the article, or Mark Pocan or others, starting to look into this and develop policy out of it for the future in Congress, so that, because as you said it, maybe you could integrate this into the answer too, like the Republicans are, they're seeing like, let's put Abolish ICE up for a vote, and, we'll use it to gin up our base and make you look like you have no plan. Or is there some sort of democratic response to working policy based off of this?
I think there was some controversy with a person like Ocasio-Cortez because Abolish ICE was initially part of her platform, but then she clarified that to her, abolishing ICE didn't mean abolishing deportations. And so a lot of the organizers and activists that I spoke to for the piece, abolishing deportation is absolutely about abolishing ICE for them. Right. And so that's the tricky part, is that everyone that I spoke to understood that at some point they're going to need elected officials to get on board. But at the same time, they seemed very wary of how elected officials would use this movement to create bills that actually, at the end of the day, didn't help immigrants. Three Democrats have proposed a bill that would shut down ICE. It would probe, whether or not they've flouted international law. It would create a special commission for people who've been deported. I mean, there is movement, but how that will take shape at the end of the day and whether that will actually benefit the most impacted, which is undocumented immigrants who have no recourse for staying in this country under this administration, I think that's really hard to tell. Yeah,
Senator Christian Gillibrand, I'm going to paraphrase, I don't have it in front of me, but she said something like that recently. Like she made a show along, with some other much more centrist, politicians a couple months ago of kind of getting with hashtag abolish ICE. But she had this statement of like, it sounded almost like something from like some type of something like a yoga teacher would say. It's like, yeah, let's like reinvent like the idea of like what ICE could be. And it was like, by the time you parsed it, it was like, oh, you literally are talking about like, let's junk that name.
Yeah, I mean, if it just means creating another agency that's sole purpose is detaining and deporting immigrants, I mean, right. I don't know if that's really beneficial.
Right. So there needs to be much more like structural meat put into like, even when people are using that hashtag, even like in a social media sense, starting to use a report like this and reporting like yours to be like, well, no, actually, we've got some actual demands here. We're not talking a rebrand.
Yeah, I mean, and I think what's really important, and what I say all the time is that, I mean, I think step number one for people who really want to get involved in this movement to abolish ICE is to understand their own immigration system. I mean, you really saw a huge uptick in the call to abolish ICE after the family separation policy at the border. And maybe this is nitpicky, but it actually isn't ICE that carried out those separations. That's CBP and Border Patrol. So like these very basic understandings, I think, are sometimes lacking. But if you understand all of these pieces and how they come together and how these agencies interact to carry out immigration enforcement and what agencies detain what immigrants and for what reasons, I mean, that's like really crucial knowledge. If you need to understand what ICE does before you can call to abolish it.
Could you do a little brief? I mean, I don't want to make it too complicated, but can you give us a little primer right now on that? Like what does ICE handle? What does Border Patrol? I don't know.
Sure. So they all fall under the Department of Homeland Security. So you've heard a lot about ORR, the Office of Refugee Resettlement, recently because they handle so they take custody of immigrant children, basically young people under the age of 18 who migrate alone or were subjected to the family separation policy. So they're in ORR custody. ICE carries out, I mean, ICE has different arms, but essentially they carry out the detaining and deportation of immigrants. So they run, well, that's murky too. ICE oversees the detention system, but they contract with private prison companies. So ICE actually doesn't run a lot of its own detention centers. Those contracts go to private prison companies. And then you have Customs and Border Protection and Border Patrol, and they're largely in charge of border enforcement. So they were the agencies that carried out the family separation policy. They're the agencies that work at the border.
Okay. So that's actually, that's extremely helpful. So, because that's, and also I think that the privatization piece, that also goes back to the 90s, right? Like even some of the legislation pushed by the Republican Congress then and signed by Bill Clinton started a process whereby private detention centers were integrated into this process too.
Yeah, private detention centers, I mean, it's the same companies that also run prisons. Right. And so you see, like, the biggest thing that gets discussed with me for people who've been detained is the lack of health care. So you have people literally dying in custody because the people who run the detention center, the private prison employees, just don't receive proper training. There aren't enough of them, whatever. ICE actually they provide the health care, but I mean, there are cases where a person is clearly having a heart attack and it doesn't occur to anyone at the detention center to call an ambulance for hours. And that person eventually ends up dying in a hospital. These are like very, very common stories. And so these private prison companies like GEO Group, like CCA, Corrections Corporation of America, they run a bulk of ICE's detention centers, and the medical care in them is really, really egregious, which is why, how that connects to ICE is, when ICE detains more and more people and the standards are already so low and people are already so harmed at detention, what are the chances that with this huge uptick in detention that we'll be able to properly care for people in detention?
Right. Well, that actually we'll leave a little bit of a disgusting note. People really need to read this piece, but I do have to say, apropos of you outlining that so well, I'm going to quote now from your piece. I asked ICE itself for comment. ICE responded this way. Recent calls to abolish ICE are dangerously misguided and overlook the vital work that ICE officers and special agents perform each day to keep communities safe, an agency spokesman told me in email. Instead of being insulted with politically motivated attacks, the men and women of ICE, I feel like I should have Mission Impossible music bedded under this. The men and women of ICE should be praised for risking life and limb every day in the name of national security and public safety. My only question is, where's the 9/11 reference? Can you break down the stats? How many, just in the interest of fairness, how many ICE agents have died and been seriously injured in the course of separating families or doing any of their work?
So that's a really good question. I mean, that's something that I wanted to look into for this piece, and it didn't make it in. So we know that over 200 immigrants have died in ICE custody, that several have already died this year. I believe it's 7 or 8, with the last person dying in July. When researching for this piece, I tried to find instances of ICE agents being harmed or killed in the line of duty, I found 2 relatively recent cases within the last 10 years. One was 2 ICE agents fighting each other, and one of them shot the other.
Oh, Jesus.
And then the other case was they were performing some operation in Mexico, and an agent was shot then. Those were the only
but not inside the United States.
Yes.
Okay, so that might have actually been something they might have actually been dealing with something real there.
Yeah, but the idea that this is, I mean, they are law enforcement agencies, so there are risks, but I couldn't find, it's not like undocumented immigrants are in the streets harming ICE agents.
Right,
It's
of course
not like that.
Right. But that being said, Tina, we should thank them for risking life and limb every day. And I want to thank you for risking life and limb in your reporting. The piece is Abolish ICE Beyond a Slogan. You can find it at Rewire.News. Tina Vasquez, senior immigration reporter at Rewire.News. We'll have links to Twitter and all the other ways that you can follow Tina's work on the show notes for Majority.fm. Tina, thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.
All right, folks. We are going to go to the fun half where we have a lot of sound. Is it fun sound, guys?
There's some good Beto O'Rourke.
Oh yeah, Ted Cruz, the debate nerd.
Owning.
Oh.
Yeah, Ted Cruz, debate nerd, getting owned in a debate.
Oh, I like that.
By a cool kid.
By a cool skateboard punk guy.
Yeah.
By a school skateboard Whataburger fan.
Wow. Lying Ted. Can't catch a break.
There was a Lion Ted moment, actually.
Folks, you're going to want this fun half.
Yeah.
Everybody should have adopted all of Trump's nicknames.
We're going to bully Ted Cruz.
Yes. Hashtag bully the right people. Yeah, no, because Sam the other day in prep was like, there's no fun sounds anymore. He really, that's a real Sam, like, oscillation there, because he goes in between, like, how come nobody got the trustees report from Social Security? We could take 10 minutes of that and I could just riff it. It could just be like jazz in the fun half. And then 2 months later, he's like, why isn't anybody looking at Ross' story? An Anderson Cooper lookalike kicked a Boehner lookalike in the nuts, and I could talk about that. Do you see?
Yeah, I must say, like, as you could probably gauge our sort of mental stability by what goes on the sound sheet. And there's certain times, like after, the IPCC climate change report, where you don't really have the appetite for just dumb Fox clips.
No, you're just like, whatever. Just let the oceans drown them.
Yeah.
Like, where they like sitting there and talking to the steak doctor, and a giant storm just comes in. Like the only good effects of climate change. We had a great TMBS last night, Matt, as we always do. But linking the Democracy in Chains research with an in-depth interview with Noah Changa on what's happening in Georgia, voter suppression, but also the very positive and very real possibility of a Stacey Abrams win, the future of the Southern Democratic Party, my Ana Navarro impression, which was actually pretty funny to me. I think I stole one of your lines, actually, by accident. I remembered it. Did you do it off mic with Ana Navarro being like, I don't know what John McCain would say, but it would be classy? Did you do that?
Didn't she actually say that?
I believe
of course she did.
Okay, I'm a Contra. And when Ronald Reagan supported paramilitaries to kill nuns, it was classy. Totally different than Trump. So we did that. We had a really good post game. I mean, you know all the ways. We are well on our way now. We cleared 1,700, so we're on our way to our new goal of 2,000 patrons. And this past weekend, the illicit history of Patrice Lumumba, the Congo Civil War, and Apple made an appearance as well. Patreon.com/TMBS plus YouTube channel, Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. Lots of new clips up right now, including really fun, actually, diss sessions of Thomas Friedman with both Alex Perrine and Matt Taibbi. Jamie.
So this week on the Antifada, we had a bit of a discussion of Comrade Gritty. Is he friend to workers, or perhaps he's mocking the sports fans of Philadelphia? Maybe a little bit of both. Then we took some questions from our listeners. We didn't have a guest this week. It was just the skeleton crew, me, Sean, and Andy. And I got to say, the listeners' questions were pretty quality.
Yeah.
So shout out to you guys. We
That makes
talked
sense.
about, what did we talk about? So out of it today. Witches and the occult. We talked about mandatory voting, which is a thing I talked about on here the other day. I fleshed that out a little. People asked my...
You support it. You want to have mandatory voting. Oh, what happened to that?
In a socialist society, yes, I do. We talked about why Sean says dead ass so much, how often we question our beliefs, and even waded a little bit into the Angela Nagel controversy. So check it out, folks.
There's an ongoing Angela Nagel.
Oh, this always is.
Or the original one.
I don't even know. Still a good book.
Listen to the show and find out.
Literary Hangover. We did Corey Robbins' book recently. That's going to be on YouTube. It was still. I was hoping to be exported overnight.
Still exporting.
Still had about 4 hours to go. So, so that's where that's at. But I should have it uploaded tonight. And I am going to be doing a. Well, some people might say George Carlin. Other people might say Age of Napoleon, but a monologue-style history edition of the Literary Hangover, where I'm going to go into the Pequot War and the Mystic Massacre and
sounds
John
really good.
Oldham, and so look out for that.
I listened to the Reactionary Mind episode.
Oh yeah,
and I thought it was very good, though it was just defamatory and shameful how you took me out of context.
Yeah, I ripped you and Jamie from context.
You ripped Jamie and I both from context in a way that was just unethical.
Like literal violence.
It was literal violence. It was unethical, and I'm going to be releasing an email exchange or a text exchange that you and I had about it. All right, folks. IMs will be fired up in a minute. Phones will be on in a minute. See you in the fun. What's up?
Do we want to do a shorter fun half?
No, I
mix?
need a
Okay,
minute.
all right, give me just 1 second here, and we will go to the. We're gonna do the. We're gonna do good old Danarchy.
Folks, I'm gonna be in LA this weekend with Sam at Politicon. If you have any restaurant recommendations for LA, DM me.
Have you been to LA before?
I've been a few times, but it's a massive county.
Yeah,
I
it
figure
is.
There's
That's
a lot
true.
of places I haven't
What
been.
part of LA is the thing in?
I have to check.
You guys are going to tear it up.
Some convention center.
Okay. I'm going to be in Boise, Idaho, which apparently
that's
there's
a
a
fun
lot
town.
of DSA and other people there who I don't know, because I'm going to be really busy, but maybe if maybe we could, I don't know. Yeah. Reach out.
It's a cool place.
There's a
Boise's
watering
cool.
hole in Boise.
There's a watering hole. I think there's a literal watering hole. Hopefully I'll be hanging out with my buddy Luke Mayville there. All right, everybody. We'll see you in the front half.
You are in for it. All right, folks. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you could imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boy is back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Danarchy's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Danarchy.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder. I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
Psych. Fuck 'em. Almost says what? Almost says what?
Hell of a lot of back. 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 Hell of a lot of back.
All lives matter.
Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black. African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keep it at 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
That's a really good song. DJ Danarchy is a giant. Yeah, let's do it. Let's get straight to this. You guys teased that very well, and now I'm eager to hear it. So, Ted Cruz, most repulsive man on planet Earth, and Beto O'Rourke, likable skateboarder centrist. Uphill battle, making a mark, and also the type of race that this does lay the groundwork, which, if we're serious about safeguarding voting rights and dealing with, the broader Republican strategic white supremacy, Texas will definitely look radically different politically. And that will have implications not only for national politics, but it's also going to have implications for public health in Texas, which is abysmal. The environmental conditions in Texas, which are abysmal. And a lot of other structural issues that you get from, unbridled crony capitalism.
Policing too.
Policing,
as a small aside, I have friends in the Dallas area, and we're driving around when I was visiting them a few years ago, and he's Latino or half Latino, and his girlfriend was white. But driving around, like when you get to certain suburbs, the music gets turned down. Everyone's looking for the local police department. It's pretty nuts down there. So we didn't
pull that video for last night. That was terrifying.
But the Beto thing where he said about the kneeling, and I think a lot of those things were a bit edited to make Beto seem a little bit more punchy than he was in the moment, but still great to be putting these messages out there, even if he doesn't win.
On the other side of that was the video that Ted Cruz posted of Beto at the church, just talking about police brutality.
Exactly. No, and Ted Cruz is this explicitly, well, Ted Cruz is, in Peter Phrase's terminology, he's an eliminationist candidate. And he really is. I mean, besides his obvious, just many, disgusting and repulsive, grotesque personal qualities, he is, and his politics are right up there with Trump and Bolsonaro and everything. This is a very extreme, very dangerous, pure authoritarian corporatist. And he got smacked around a little bit by Beto O'Rourke. Let's start with clip number 3.
With Congressman O'Rourke leading the way, 2 years of a partisan circus shutting down the federal government in a witch hunt on the president, that's not good for the state of Texas. It's not good for our country.
Senator, that is your time. 90 seconds response from you, Mr. O'Rourke.
Really interesting to hear you talk about a partisan circus after your last 6 years in the U.S. Senate.
That was, yes, you can definitely see the tonal contrast there. And of course, Ted Cruz is known for partisan grandstanding. Going back to when he first got into Senate, I think he helped spread a lie that Chuck Hagel, who's a former Republican senator from Nebraska and a realist, old school establishment type who was Obama's defense secretary, and he had said some mildly critical things about Israel. And there was a rumor, a smear, a lie about him, I think, taking a check from a group called Friends of Hamas. And Cruz, I believe, was part of spreading that, along with that great intellect Ben Shapiro. But now this is where we get, we got to double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Now this is where it gets really good. This is where power twins unite. And, you know, the thing about Donald Trump, one of the worst people on the planet as well, but great.
Effective bully.
Excellent nicknames. And the thing that he's not, I mean, his main talents are inheriting money and owning Republicans. And Beto O'Rourke jumped off that and did this.
This is what you can expect over the course of this debate. Senator Cruz is not going to be honest with you. He's going to make up positions and votes that I've never held or have ever taken. He's dishonest. It's why the president called him Lying Ted, and it's why the nickname stuck, because it's true.
Yeah. You go, suburban dad Obama. Yeah. Fuck yeah, you go, sensible Adidas shoes Obama.
It's awesome seeing Ted Cruz be like, I don't
know. I'm smart enough to know that you own me, but graceless enough to pretend that I don't care. And here is their final exchange where O'Rourke continues on the lying Ted theme.
Speaking of balancing budgets, only one of us has, with good friends in El Paso, started a small business. Met that payroll every week, balanced the books, made sure that we delivered for our clients. Only one of us has served at the local government level, every single year balancing the budget, seeing each other not as Republicans and Democrats, but as council members entrusted with a fiduciary responsibility to deliver for the taxpayers of El Paso. Every single year we did. And for Senator Cruz to say that this isn't going to bust the budget at a time of $21 trillion in debt, when we're on track to deficit spend to the tune of $1 trillion a year, he voted to add $2 trillion. And those tax cuts disproportionately will flow to corporations who are already sitting on record piles of cash and the already wealthy in a country that is riven with income inequality unseen since the last Gilded Age. Why? In the days just before and just after that vote, Senator Cruz accepted $120,000 from the political action committees who represent the corporate interests that benefited from this tax cut. Why does he vote for this? Why does he vote for internet companies to sell your private browsing data to the highest bidder without your consent? Why does he not vote for universal background checks in a country that loses 30,000 people to gun violence every year? Follow the money. In each of these cases, if you look at the Political Action Committee contributions to Senator Cruz, it helps to explain the reasons for his vote and how corrupted Congress has become. I don't take PAC money, not a dime. I always and only represent the people of Texas.
That's great. That's a strong. I mean, look, and actually, that and it's also really interesting because as we keep saying, Beto O'Rourke is he's certainly not a socialist, and he's not a liberal. I mean, he's a centrist Democrat. But first of all, but he's actually more of a genuine centrist in the sense that that is where the center of most people are at. It's not a left position to oppose selling your private data information to third parties. And it's obvious that most people want the sort of background check policies they poll over 70% he's talking about.
And don't want to sell the internet to tech companies.
And don't want to sell the internet to tech companies and don't want to have tax breaks that are just designed to benefit oligarchs and corporations. So the way he's branding and being a centrist is actually... If Beto O'Rourke came to represent centrism, we'd have many battles and disagreements with him, but that would be a vast improvement for our country's politics. So, yeah, I mean, Godspeed and keep embarrassing that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not inspired by Beto O'Rourke. He is a status quo neoliberal centrist, but the Republicans are a death cult. They want to drive us off of a cliff. So, given the choices, certainly support the centrist.
Absolutely, and as I say, it's if that's centrism versus Hillary Clinton, that's an upgrade.
And there's different, there are different flavors of centrism.
That's what I'm saying.
The centrism we had when FDR was in power is different than even the one we had when Truman was in power, and very different than the one we had when JFK and Nixon, right?
And put it in the context of Texas as well. I mean, this guy even standing next to Ted Cruz, you're like, wow.
And he could have just
replace Ted Cruz.
He could have left the background check thing out too, though.
Yeah.
That was surprising.
That sort of messaging, I'm surprised by how willing he is to lean in.
I think that's a decision that he's like, this is all about the new electorate, which is another shift in centrism.
It's a conscious pathfinding.
If you become
campaign.
absolutely. Is the board? I don't know what happened to it, but it's unplugged. What? All right. Well, let's figure that out before tomorrow. So, well, I won't be here. So if Dave's like, "Where's my board?" I won't have to deal with it.
Nice.
Enjoy yourselves.
If you wonder how climate change keeps getting kicked down the road.
Well, I mean, I'm the nice and chill one, so I would like to get it fixed now, but I don't see any takers to come over and figure it out. So I guess we'll wait till tomorrow, and then I'm actually. All right.
I'm afraid I'm going to make it worse.
No, that's okay. Don't. We should not try. They should try. Okay. Let's do this because this is awesome. So let's do the Ahmadinejad thing. So. Okay, we can start with Lindsey Graham. Why not? Yeah, Lindsey Graham is another just utter oddity. Really, really terrible person. And he had a little tantrum about MBS yesterday, which I'm sure won't last. But he has been a diligent and constant warmonger and bigot towards Iranians. This is so he's going to be an asshole. And be bigoted towards Iran, and also just make lame joke that falls flat. And then we have another ongoing in a series of woke Brian Kilmeade.
Big story is the president's getting better and better at being president. Have you seen this?
He told me he was getting better. Yes, I mean he's having so much fun doing. He's rocking it.
Keep it up.
All right. Keep it up, Donald.
Lindsey Graham, thank you very much. Come back in a couple of weeks and we'll take a look.
We'll find out who you really are.
I'll probably be Iranian. That'd be terrible.
Oh, they're great people, just bad leaders.
Yeah, bad leaders.
All right.
I'm not in the out.
I can't believe how fast Kilmeade was to pick up that. Oh, that was just a blatantly racist thing to say.
Great people, bad leaders. God.
Let's just enjoy
I have
this.
to say, at some point for this, support for drone strikes and getting kind of woke about racism, Kilmeade's part of the Obama coalition.
Yeah.
Kilmeade probably has a Iranian dermatologist or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, my derm gave me Giants tickets. He's a cool guy.
Let's just look at this casual racism by Lindsey Graham just once again, because he's a senator in a state
and a leading senator.
Yeah,
and one who's given constant media platforms, and also the type of guy that people would say, when are people like Lindsey Graham going to call out Donald Trump for being a bigot? Because, of course, bigotry isn't what the Republican Party's all about.
Yeah, and most of the time, American leaders probably could be caught saying this maybe in private.
Yeah, maybe in private. I'm also, as is my want, this is just so goddamn unfunny.
Well.
Back in a couple of weeks and we'll take a look.
We'll find out who you really are.
I'll probably be Iranian. That'd be terrible.
Oh, they're great people, just bad leaders.
Yeah, bad leaders.
All right.
I'm not in the Ayatollah brand.
Wait, why is Lindsey Graham taking a DNA test to
They must
begin
have been
with?
talking
Did I
about
miss something?
They're talking about Warren.
Yeah, they're talking about the Elizabeth Warren thing.
Ugh. For the record, don't play Trump's race science games, folks.
Yes.
If anyone else, if he tries to get any other Democrats to do it, just say no.
He just tries to get Pelosi.
Yeah.
But let's go to this.
Yeah, what are you? So, anyways, wait, let me try. I don't get that. I
guess we'll do 2 separate clips.
Yeah, we'll do 2 separate clips. This is okay. Just all right.
It's not happening.
It's okay. So, you know how George W. Bush? I think were we talking about this? Were we making this comparison?
Yeah, how basically he's Iranian George Bush. If we can launder
right.
George Bush,
that's the point, and we shouldn't. George Bush, George Bush obviously just via the nature of the country he ran has way more, destruction on his plate than Ahmadinejad, way more bodies. Mohammed Ahmadinejad, there's some interesting things about this before we get to the amazingly hilarious part. Mohammed Ahmadinejad was the president of Iran for a couple of terms, I think from 2003 to 2012, if I'm not mistaken. He was a right-wing populist. His most grave moment, in my view, and I know there's certainly I remember there even back then there was tanky conspiracies about this, but he definitely crushed and was part of a broader regime that crushed the Green Civil Rights Movement in 2009, which happened after Mir Hussein Mousavi said that the election was stolen from him by Ahmadinejad, which is a very credible charge. I don't know for a fact, but I would tend to believe Mousavi, former President Khatami, who was a great reformer, and the Green Movement. So Ahmadinejad has this on his list, and he also obviously, he certainly said anti-Semitic things. He definitely did not say the comment about wiping Israel off the map. That's a lie and a mistranslation. And he, on the other hand, in ways that actually offended some of the more conservative elements of the Iranian establishment, built very close ties with the Latin American left and had a sort of, at times, kind of developing world-oriented populism. And he has gotten, and so the point being, this guy was not Hitler, which is how he was covered in the U.S. press when he was the head of Iran, when he was the president of Iran. So a guy who, in reality, you could compare, maybe to, sure, another autocratic leader, guy with bad human rights record, nowhere near the record of, as an example, Saudi Arabia, a country that we support, obviously. And people were up at night having hysterics over this guy and using it to justify everything from the Israeli occupation, killing in Gaza, to huge defense spending, to people actually wanting what something is still terrifyingly possible, a war in Iran. People really used this guy as a boogeyman, and it was ridiculous then, but it was commonly accepted practice. Fast forward to 2018, and Mohammed Ahmadinejad probably has one of the most positive, optimistic, sunny, and civil Twitter accounts on planet Earth. And before we read this, I'm going to paraphrase one from the other day. Well, also he's a free Lula, so that gets a lot of points with me. But he got a he got a tweet from somebody, because it's sort of catching on that he's very nice. And somebody was complaining, I think it was that Michigan's having a bad season. I think it was Michigan. Oh yeah, you got the Michigan tweet. We got to read it. We got to do that one before this one, because this one's actually a great precursor, I think. So this guy tweets, "Dear Mahmoud." Oh yeah, okay. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad actually tweets this because he's woke. The NFL season will start once again this week. Unfortunately, again, at Colin Kaepernick 7 is not on the NFL roster, even though he's one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Hashtag Colin Kaepernick, hashtag NFL.
Come on, Giants.
So, yes, Ahmadinejad is more woke than the Giants. Kaepernick is good. I don't know, he's one of the best in the league. He might slightly oversold.
No, he's the best.
He is literally the best.
In my opinion.
I don't know, play-wise. But he's good. And it's ridiculous. It's obvious that he's getting shut out of a job for his politics. Now, in Iran, there are streets named after Malcolm X, as an example, because there's actually a lot of sort of respect for and interest in the civil rights movement. So this is where some of this is coming from. And this guy took the right response here, which is, yes, the politics is interesting. It's cool that he did that. But let's see where else we could take Ahmadinejad in terms of his civil and positive Twitter engagement. So this guy writes, "Dear Mahmoud, we have much bigger problems here. Michigan is 8-8 in the last 16 games under Coach Coach Jim
Harbaugh. Jim, yeah.
I'm just reading out the Twitter.
Gotcha,
it just makes it funnier. At Coach Jim for UM. Hashtag Go Blue. Also, college football is the only authentic football. Cordially, Fred."
Problematic.
Now, Ahmadinejad, how does he respond to this? Now, if he was some annoying woke Twitter activist, he would say, "How dare you minimize, Colin Kaepernick," or something. He would alienate. He wouldn't build coalitions.
He would say what Brendan is going to say, which is like, "You idiot!
Yeah,
college football players don't get played. You're
an exploiter."
Exactly.
Yeah, but instead, Ahmadinejad, with the politician's touch and, frankly, just good goddamn Twitter etiquette, writes back, "With hard work, inshallah, U of M will return to its glory days."
Wow.
Which, literally, everybody should be watching. Could you imagine the contrast between Ahmadinejad's Twitter? I mean, we don't have to imagine it. Just contrast it with Trump. This guy's an angel.
To be fair, Michigan is ranked 6th in college football right now. They're 6-1.
Well, with hard work, inshallah, U of M will return to its glory days, Brendan.
Trump would respond being like, "Yeah, Jim Harbaugh's a bum."
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh's a bum. Michigan's sad. It's been a terrible season. Everybody's saying it.
They're a weird Harbaugh family.
Yeah. All right, and that led to our friend Virgil Texas of Chapo Trap House to come up with this innovative question. So wait, there's another first Ahmadinejad tweet, right? Let's read the first one.
More like woke Ahmadinejad.
Oh, this is more like woke Ahmadinejad. One of the main objectives of the hashtag Black Panther Party was, and by the way, this is absolutely true, was feeding the hungry, which did not sit well with the hashtag United States government, hashtag Brother Huey, hashtag October 15th. It's time to fight back. That's what Huey said, 2 shots in the dark, and now Huey's dead, end quote, which is a saying from the time. Virgil Texas then tweets, "Sir, do you follow back?" And Ahmadinejad, continuing as the most classy gentleman in all of Twitter, responds, "What do you usually post about, sir?"
This is so weird.
We're definitely I could imagine some wild shit, particularly with experiences under certain substances when I was younger. But I have to say, when I was following Iran, I definitely never had writing like a term paper on Iran and being like, you know what, one day there's going to be this thing that everybody wastes their days on called Twitter. And Ahmadinejad's going to be one of the most knowledgeable, classy, civil rights oriented people in the entire thing.
Wow. Maybe Virgil will teach him some intersectionality.
Be an amazing Chapo guest.
No, I will brawl for TMBS. He is a natural TMBS guest. If he's going on any of these shows, it is absolutely my show. That's no bullshit.
I'm going to ask him if he still thinks there are no gay people in Iran. Or maybe he's changed his mind on that.
There's some rumors about that, but I won't get into it. Yeah. You're calling from an 850 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael. This is Nathan in Pensacola, Florida.
Hey, Nathan. What's going on? What's on your mind?
Hey, man. I was just wanted to comment real quick about the commentary I've been seeing about Elizabeth Warren with this DNA test.
Okay.
I have a problem with it. Not on this show, but kind of in the general media. Just the way, like, her racial background is being litigated. Mm-hmm. It would seem to me like that's kind of coming from a really privileged place and is immuting a kind of racism when, like, you're splitting hairs over, like, you know, if 1/16 of her great whatever grandparents may or may not have been an Indian, or, you know, they're saying, like, somehow that, you know, that experience doesn't exist. And I have just been connecting it to my own life. Like, my ancestors come from 5 or 6 different continents just because of the history of colonialism in this you know, in the Americas. And I'm thinking, you know, I couldn't really tell you where all my different ancestors came from, and it seems to, you know, be the same sort of deal with her. And I kind of am flubbing some of the stuff I had written here, but like, I don't know.
I hear what you have to say. I mean, I think, and I got to just say, big picture, I really, like, I don't care. And in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And even, no, I mean, not your point, but just this whole story. And part of it is honestly because it's just not for me to care one way or another. Right? Like, if the Cherokee tribe says, like, they don't like what she did, then that's certainly not for me to comment on. And then conversely, it's not for me to say that she isn't what her family says she is. I think more deeply, if you get in, you know, how do you negotiate the fact that fundamentally these things are not real, right? Literally, right?
Right.
We have an anti-essentialist
I mean, they're not.
perspective. These things are not real. They are made up categories. And then conversely, obviously, it is offensive to people who've had a very real experience historically and presently to claim an identity of which you don't share certain very core characteristics of that experience. Okay, that's true. And then there's also, the third point, which is, I mean, I guess if I have to be blunt, it's like, I think she has a family story. She obviously got where she is because she's smart. She works hard. She actually has a very admirable, fascinating bio. And I think she also saw an opportunity in a certain context that, maybe it'll give her a couple more points on a job application or something. I don't know. That's my read on it. And that's an indictment, frankly, of meritocracy, of competition in the job market, whatever. But it's just not I'm glad it's frankly, I like the idea that it might hurt her relative to Bernie because I prefer Bernie, but I don't care. I cannot be persuaded to care
Michael,
about any of this.
To just see I'm a little more focused on what I wanted to say now.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess I sort of see this as kind of a pitch from the right to minority groups, and what it seems like they're trying to activate resentment among non-white people against someone. Oh, look at her! Look at this white lib pretending to be.
Well, let me tell you something, dude.
Minority group.
I could tell you anecdotally, and it's not huge, but it's two people. He didn't need to do that for people to think that was a very stupid thing for her to do. So I'm like, yeah. I mean, look, let's be real here. If you give Trump that open lane, he's gonna take it, and if you play with that stuff, it's gonna offend some people, and that's not a right word. I guess I don't buy that part of it, to be honest.
There was no way for her to win that game with him.
Yeah,
the only way to win was not to play, honestly.
And and the offense that some people took had nothing to do with Trump. And I think that yes, he did see an example. Yes, when liberal types give Republicans, even if they're trivial and they don't matter, it doesn't matter. The whole, oh, you say you're liberal, but Bernie Sanders wears a winter coat, I mean, yes, these idiots are going to always use stuff like that. It's politics. What are you going to do?
The hypocrisy that Trump thinks he was exposing, right, is that on the one hand, liberals say, oh, race isn't real. It's not biological. Everything is postmodern. And on the other hand, when it suits them, they want to leverage their racial identity for political benefit.
Do you think Trump really thought that? I don't think so. I think he just, I think you're right, but I think Trump was just like, she said she was, but she's not Pocahontas.
Well, and there's the affirmative action.
That's it. Yeah, it's affirmative action.
Right.
Right. That's what it is. It's affirmative action.
And the way you square that circle is that race is a real abstraction, right? It's a socially constructed category that does very real things in the world. So the mistake she made, I think, she really could have presented it like, I'm just trolling you into giving $1 million to charity, but that's not what she did. It was very sincere. And she does present Native American heritage or race or whatever as something biologically determined.
Well, I just point in here because she explicitly says in the video that she understands the distinction between biology and tribal affiliation. She does say that, she pays lip service to that in the clip.
Well, that's good.
But I understand the overall point.
At the end of the day, your race is determined by how you are perceived and treated in this society. And she has never been treated as a Native American.
Right. That's right. Yep, and that's why it's never going to work. That's why it's never going to work, and that's why
it's all one-droppy and bullshit. I agree with that.
I agree with you, but Jamie, that's really the bottom line. If you could, that's and right that and there's always the history, even obviously much more dangerous and serious histories of people quote unquote passing, and that illustrates the reality is that her life was not shaped, as far as we know at all, by the experience of what being a Native American woman would entail in this country. And that's the bottom line.
Yeah, like I guess since we're talking about this, we can just address it. Like when the Ben Carson thing happened, if people remember that, Ben Carson was also saying he was part Cherokee, then he took he did 23andMe, and it turned out he wasn't. And then he's like, I guess that was just a myth. I thought Elizabeth Warren should do that because I thought a test was going to say she wasn't, and then she should just say, and then she could have just addressed like, look, these are family myths that get passed down the ages, and we were wrong. This makes it more complicated, right? Because she does have like some connection to.
But I think most white people from that part of the country.
No,
will
I know,
too,
but this is the second part of this, right?
Yeah.
And this is not unproblematic, but it is something notable that you probably should have addressed with like a tribal leader or something, which is that your family kept that story alive in a family mythology. And I do think there's problematic parts of that, but it's also not like, they weren't doing this to try to get a granddaughter into Harvard down the line, right?
No.
Like it was a more genuine family culture thing. And I do think it is problematic the way white people would, like hold on to that as if like it's some sort of, like and that like American history is full of this sort of thing, like the cross racial mixing, and that's sort of like your claim to Americanness or something like that, right? Like that this is a common thing, and that's the discussion she should have had. Instead, what she did is say, look, I got this DNA results and it vindicates everything I've been saying, and here's my family's
Meanwhile, I'm talking about freeing Lula da Silva.
And meanwhile, thousands of Native Americans are getting disenfranchised in North Dakota.
Well, that was the thing that also struck me. It was like, if she did the video like, hey, here's this, like you said, turn it kind of into a joke, say like, all right, fuck you, Trump. And incidentally, I have legislation that's going to address this travesty that was just confirmed by the Supreme Court to disenfranchise Native American voters. Thanks for the call, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
You're calling from an 847 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael. It's Josh from Chicago.
Josh from Chicago. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to hear your voice. What's going on?
Good to hear your voice too, Michael.
Pompeo and MBS.
This is like, this is a very Pompeo MBS meeting.
Very intimate.
Yeah.
Yes,
Welcome
exactly.
to Riyadh, my friend.
Exactly.
I consider this show a mini emirate when I host.
I'm calling. First of all, you guys were discussing yesterday. Holly Hawkins, the guy who's the Green Party candidate,
Howie Hawkins,
for governor.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
ISO just unendorsed him.
ISO just unendorsed him. Okay. Why?
Because he is campaigning with Jimmy Dore, actually.
Oh, geez.
Oh, well, that answers
Really?
my question about who I'm voting for. Forget it. All right. I guess.
Wow, I was gonna.
I guess
throw in my
Cuomo on the
protest
Working
vote.
Families Party. It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to too, because
I know.
Bhaskar endorsed him last night.
That
on
was the
Twitter.
reason that Bhaskar endorsed him. I was like,
that makes my decision easy.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
I still might do that.
Well, I mean, not everyone knows everything
Yeah,
there is to
I
know
mean-
about Jimmy Dore, right?
I mean, for what it's worth,
Yeah.
that's actually might be just.
What is
that might be
ISO's
kind of a petty reason. to
What's the
not
deal with the ISO? Are they like
Well,
anti-dum-dum left now? all
Yeah,
of
is
a sudden?
ISO watching
Well,
the show?
The reason they said is because of Jimmy's take on Assad and Syria.
Yeah.
They find unacceptable.
I agree.
Which
It
I
is
do too.
unacceptable. His like. He
What-
just did
what is
another
it?
video. I can't even get into it. He has this. Look, let me just say, I'm not even going to get into it. Read or watch. Benjamin Dixon did a great video called "Why Is Jimmy Dore So Desperate to Unite with Fascists," which is important to watch. And I would also watch our video on Michael Brooks' show YouTube page on Jimmy Dore even fucking up Brazil. I mean, Jesus Christ.
Ah, jeez.
I mean, Lava Jato.
Yeah, he misrepresented
Lava
Fred
Jato.
Hampton, right? That was Fred Hampton.
That was yeah. He said, along with Chris Hedges, which I would expect more from Chris Hedges, for what it's worth. I'm not like the biggest Chris Hedges fan in the world, but
Should
he
know
is.
better.
He should know better. They literally said that Fred Hampton, who was assassinated by either the FBI or the Chicago police or some version of both, he was it was only 21 years old. He was one of the most impressive leaders in American life, was assassinated. Generational leader, assassinated by state security apparatus when he's 21 years old. And he appealed to the Young Lords, who I think were Puerto Rican, and other groups that were race-based like the Panthers, but left. One of those groups was called the Young Patriots. Now, the Young Patriots wore Confederate flags in the beginning because they were trying to reclaim that image. They actually later got rid of them because it wouldn't work. But they were a white, blue-collar, and obviously it wasn't like you needed to be white to join, but that's literally what they were. A Southern, white, blue-collar, whatever, left Marxist, anti-racist group that were, all about radical Marxist politics. And here's a picture of them hanging with the Panthers. And they're in similar garb. But they were leftists. I would recommend, there was a great piece in the Jacobin about it. Somehow, Hedges and Dorr smear, I would say, their legacy by saying that they were, actually on the right, or Klansmen or Confederates. They were not. They were socialists. And that all of a sudden became a leverage point for some type of fucking insane argument, which actually is distilled in the screen cap of the video, which is the original Jimmy Dore video is, can fascists and the left work together? And there's a picture of a Black Lives Matter activist and then a picture of a white guy at Charlottesville. As if, and by the way, you can have, that's disgusting. And you can have critiques of Black Lives Matter and no group is perfect and all. I'm not talking about that. But if you can't understand that Black Lives Matter and Jews won't replace us and run over Heather Heyer are on totally different, not only just from a moral perspective, completely different moral planes, but that there is not a shared economic issue there. Those are primarily upper middle class, very weird identity-obsessed white people who have no economic agenda. They have an ethno-state agenda. And the Young Patriots were an amazing organization, and that type of politics is actually crucial for saving our future, and totally the opposite of what they said.
And that erasure of history is directly helpful to fascism. I mean, literally, if it wasn't already asking the left to work with fascists.
If you don't know anything, you don't know anything. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, man. I on the other hand, I don't want to get into they were on Jimmy Dore's show or whatever. I don't want to play that game. But that's more disappointing. It's
more to do with policy and potentially the fact that foreign policy with governors is it's not the same thing as someone running for president, but the fact that Howie Hawkins, I'd never heard him speak about Syria.
Right.
But and I agree with you guys when you say look, don't go into Syria at the same time. Assad is an absolute fucking dictator.
Right.
And there's and I don't want to support someone who whitewashes what Assad is doing.
Yeah, I feel you.
And so I think that one more thing can I mention? There was this is from Chicago. This is critical. There was some of J.B. Pritzker's staffers just filed a lawsuit against him, alleging racial discrimination. I don't know if you've read this or heard about this.
Is he the Democratic nominee for governor?
Yeah.
Oh
in Illinois, unfortunately.
Right. Okay.
So he basically refuses to go into African-American neighborhoods and Latino neighborhoods unless they, quote-unquote, stop shooting, unless they stop their shooting. This is what they've accusing him of saying. Obviously, I hope the Browner doesn't win his election again, but it's just really, I believe these accusations too, because I believe that someone like him would behave like that. It's just really disappointing to see this, especially to see him act like this.
Well, it's disgusting. I actually would be really interested in what the state protocols could be to replace him, if the Democrats could get another nominee, because that is, that might be getting to the level of functionally unacceptable in terms of just in terms of even governing. Thanks for the call, man. I appreciate it. Let's do a few IMs. Vespa, I hate to keep bringing up the same thing, but I'm reading stuff about Larry Hoover, and I feel very... I don't know who Larry Hoover is. Who's Larry Hoover? Do you guys know who that is?
No clue.
Stuff about Larry
Hoover, a drug dealer in Chicago.
Oh, and thoughts are very conflicted as I see validity for and against. I very much like to see an analysis and conclusion from you at some point here on TMBS. Left is best. Hove, J Adlibs. Okay, I'll look into that. I got you. Oh, it's time to fight back. That's what Yui said. 2 shot in the dark. Now Yui's dead is a Tupac quote.
I was wondering where that was.
It's a Tupac quote.
That was the best part of Tupac, right? Like his movement.
Very historically
Yeah.
oriented. I'm not a huge
No.
Tupac fan, but he was, he brought that. I mean, his mother was a Black Panther.
Yeah, and I feel like just symbolically for the culture, he represents that, even though it might not be as substantive as.
I think it was partially, and he was, but also, the thing that's about him is he was 24 when he was killed. Right. I mean, so it's like you don't know. I remember when I was probably like 12 or something, and I got probably like the last CD right before he was killed. I don't even remember the name of it, but it was a double disc Death Row Records CD, and it was total like fuck Dre, fuck the East Coast, like it was pure great, just like gangster music. And I remember on the liner notes though, it was like "Free Mumia Abu Jamal." It's like, all right, like you could see this interesting tensions there. Ryan from California, Brendan, Politicon's in downtown LA. If you go to the coast, go to Baby Blues in Venice on Lincoln. It's a tiny joint, but delicious. There was a larger second store in mid-city Fairfax area, but I don't know if it's still around. I don't know if you'll get out there. That's a little bit of a schlep, I think.
I think so. But thank you for the recommendations. Going in my saved notes on my Google Maps.
Jay Cool, can we count on Brendan to record Sam when he gets into Social Security arguments at the dinner table? Brendan, are you going to Pac-Man him?
We'll see.
All right, we'll see. I think Brendan's got... I've been concerned that Brendan's been recording all of us, actually. That's sort of my...
Maybe that's what his podcast is going to be.
Oh, damn it. All right. Swenton, a friend of mine occasionally parrots the left is growing because Trump won and Clinton would have suffocated the left further, empowering the right argument. That argument drives me fucking crazy. What if Clinton escalated a war with Russia and that issue delineated the left and the center and the Clinton center left? It's just way too hypothetical, and there's so many scenarios that could have potentially done for the left what Trump did. He would have accomplished a shit ton less terror against immigrants, Muslims, women, science, the planet, etc. Just shut the fuck up about Trump helping the left and go up and get to building the global left project. Godspeed, MR Crew. I agree with that completely, and I also think that that's also not a material analysis, because the left was already growing and already in momentum, and you would have seen what Bernie Sanders' campaign was if the conditions were not already setting up the growth of the need in more and more people's minds for that kind of politics. And the idea, and in fact, that's actually a very anti-left argument in a way, because if you actually really drill down on it, you're sort of saying that those neoliberal conditions weren't as barbaric and ruthless enough on their own terms to get to that point, which they absolutely were. So you're saying like, oh no, we absolutely need to just get things into complete free fall and terror, mostly for other people, of course, because most of the people I hear making these arguments are not on the front lines of anything. It's a bullshit argument. It's fucking stupid. Fat Nixon, okay. I hate Tucker Carlson, but calling Warren the leader of the Me Too movement is hilarious. That's pretty funny. A penny for your thoughts. Great hiking in Idaho. Yes, I am. I'm bringing my boots. I do want to get out there. Ari Melber has the best response to the Warren DNA story. Think of the impact if it would have been of much attention would go to North Dakota voter suppression, Native American voters. Yeah, Matt brought that up. Bullprog, no wonder Bannon was flinching and looking over his shoulders on the Saudi Arabia trip. Also, the courts unsealed Keith Ellison's divorce papers today. Right-wing smear merchants were looking for claims of abuse, but turns out he was the one allegedly abused. Yeah, I never bought those Ellison story.
Yeah, I didn't like to comment on it publicly, but I was prepared to believe that maybe Ellison was abusive in a relationship, but I was not prepared to believe that the Minnesota media was covering up for him. And they had apparently been looking at these texts, and then a video was alleged to exist, and it didn't.
And the constant shifting reasons of why the video couldn't come out.
Yeah, and I think it's a really, really unfortunate situation that I think was disgustingly, I guess, fanned by the GOP in Minnesota, and I think it's something that we're going to have.
Feature not a bug. That's only going to increase. Do you think a lot of Contagious Chameleon, do you think a lot of polling, even in specific districts, is missing new energized voters who will make up much of the blue wave? There's no way to tell. I can't. That, my guess would be, is going to really vary. That type of thing would really vary by candidate. Random IM, yes, we did address the Jimmy Dore thing. Retcon, my girlfriend and I are big MRNT and BS fans. Today is my birthday. Can you please use an Obama voice with a happy birthday, white boy? She's going to hear it and think I'm the coolest. Happy birthday, white boy. Your boyfriend's really cool in a certain sense. Allahu Akbar. Head Heath DG. Check out the Bernie new video about Yemen and Saudi Arabia. Very effective and on point. Do we have that? Okay. This is a piece that NBC News did. They profiled the white supremacist group Europa.
Identity Europa, excuse me. Which is it is what it sounds like. They're Proud Boys without tattoos.
They're nerdy Proud Boys.
They're more explicitly racist than the Proud Boys.
They don't do the game of it's culture, not race.
Yeah, I don't know that there are any people of color in Identity Europa, whereas there are in the Proud Boys.
Right. And look, this is another aspect of the culture and of Trump being president and of the rise of global fascism and of credulous, mainstream, flattened centrism. This is how a totally soft and credulous report about a disgusting hate group gets aired on NBC News during the Today Show.
The man with the megaphone is Patrick Casey, executive director of Identity Europa, one of the groups that marched at last year's Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville that would turn deadly. The group's image...
It didn't turn deadly. One of the people that is aligned with the group you're profiling is this actually NBC's music that they betted?
Yep.
This isn't some copy? Okay, that's ridiculous.
This is their exposed Nazi ideas to the world music.
One of their comrades ran over and murdered a woman Heather Hare, who was marching and protesting for the correct side of history.
Yeah, a white supremacist rammed his car into protesters.
Yes, and murdered one of them. And there was also other people that were beaten by these same people that the same groups that the people you're profiling are aligned with. Go ahead.
Clean cut, no visible tattoos, no criminal record. Its message, pro-white.
I do think that we need to maintain a supermajority in this country.
Identity Europa makes it clear to join, you have to be of European heritage, whites only.
So you have to be white and you can't be Jewish, I imagine.
Right.
Why isn't that racist? Wouldn't most say that that's simply racist?
Yes, it's racist. They are a racist organization.
They're asking about race.
Change my mind.
I know he's going to do a spin, presumably, where it's like, no, it's about everybody has their own identity and everybody needs to be protected. He's going to use the same way that Richard Spencer leveraged identity politics. He's going to do the same thing. But that is I don't even know if that's credulous. That's a criminally negligent question for a white supremacist group. Keep going.
Well, we're trying to move beyond the paradigm that includes, buzzwords like racist and
so what is it? If not racist, what is it?
Identitarian.
It's how watchdogs say groups like this often disguise white supremacist views. Casey runs Identity Europa out of his home a few hours outside Washington. He's asked us not to identify exactly where he lives, in addition to hosting anti-immigration demonstrations like this one at the Mexico border. Casey's deploying some of his 800 members to post recruitment signs on college campuses nationwide, from San Diego State to NYU. Experts warn these groups are trying to lure students by blending into the mainstream.
These are very smart, very savvy groups, and that's one of the things that differentiates them from groups in the past, is you can't just write them off as ignorant thugs.
Among Identity Europa's goals, Casey told us, covertly taking over the GOP.
We encourage our guys to go to young Republicans, college Republicans meetings, to go to local GOP meetings as well, to network with people, to perhaps somewhat discreetly at first start broaching identitarian and nationalist ideas.
Why discreetly at first?
You want to make an effort to blend in, right? These ideas are a bit controversial, but we are convinced that the logical conclusion of Trump's Make America Great Again agenda does need to address demographics.
Why the need to blend in if these views you think aren't ones that would be widely embraced?
Right. Well, they're controversial at this point, but that doesn't negate their validity. Quite often, controversial ideas start off as being very taboo, and people have to be very careful with them, but they can skillfully insert them into the mainstream.
Through TV interviews like this.
Yeah, through getting a mass platform for easy interviews.
I'm doing it right now.
Yeah, it's actually happening. Thank you for your support in this, you fucking moron. We don't have to dismiss them as, what she say, ignorant thugs. We could dismiss them as preppy fucking morons. They already run the Republican Party. They're absolutely in the center of the Republican Party. It is happening now. Steve King, Donald Trump, Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, John Roberts gutted the Voting Rights Act. And also, in addition to that, look at that sign, Save the Boers. That is the lie white supremacist meme about South African farms that Joe Rogan recycled. That's how this stuff flows.
I don't know that a group that is explicitly white nationalist is going to be admitted, at least formally, into the mainstream of the right, though. Like, it's always going to be a second order thing behind it. Whereas I think maybe we gave short shrift to it the other day, but the Proud Boys, they're not explicitly white nationalists. Obviously, they are racist. They are explicitly sexist. That is an explicit part of their ideology. Gavin has gone on TV talking about, like, making some very gender essentialist arguments about how, like, women are happier when they're, like, in the home taking care of the kids. So it's interesting to see who gets admitted to mainstream circles and who doesn't. And I think the Proud Boys are closer to that than Identity Europa.
Just reading up on organization's founder, Nathan D'Amigo. D'Amigo grew up in San Jose, California, and was a member of the U.S. Marine Corps from 2005 to 2007. Remember what we were saying about right-wing Marines? How they're interesting people. In November 2007, D'Amigo robbed a Los Mesa, California taxicab driver at gunpoint, believing that the man was Iraqi. D'Amigo was convicted of armed robbery and was incarcerated for a year in county jail and 4 years in state prison. He said of the event that it's something I'm certainly not proud of, attributing his behavior to major issues after returning from Iraq. So probably his group is something that we need to give airtime to.
Definitely, and be monitoring. I do want to say, though, you brought up Gavin McInnes. And sometimes you ask yourself, I mean, Sam would know better than me. You would know better than me. I don't know Gavin McInnes. I've never met Gavin McInnes. I only know who Gavin McInnes is basically because of clips on this show and my buddy Dante Nero's, which is a whole other story. Actually, but a really worthwhile one. But you do ask yourself, why is someone who they are? Where does it come from? What are the origins? What was it in their background, family, country, society, economy? And sometimes the answer to that very seemingly complex question is a shave away.
It's right under your nose.
It is literally right under your nose, or right under your mouth if you're Gavin McInnes. Check out this picture if you want to understand really just everything of where Gavin McInnes is coming from. And I just want to put out a warning. If there are children in the room, have them leave. Wow. Full-on Halloween shit right there. Look at that. Wow. All right.
Wow.
If any of us in this room, had that chin situation, We might. You know how Sam was like, if my career collapsed, I wouldn't be a racist. Well, let me tell you something. If Sam had that chin, he might be a Proud Boy.
I think his chin recedes. his chin recedes a fraction of a millimeter every time he does something racist.
It's like opposite Pinocchio. Oh my God. On the topic of legitimizing these people, NYT Metro just published a very bad tweet about Gavin. I don't even want to read it.
What does it say?
It says Gavin McInnes. They profiled him, I guess.
Of course.
Gavin McInnes has set himself apart from the current crop of professionally outraged right-wing pundits, not only for being able to spout aggressive rhetoric, but also for being willing to get physical at times.
Physical, let's get physical.
That's a nice way of
that's definitely
putting
that makes him sound like a fun dude, basically. Well, that's the Times job. I love that. Whether it's like the nerd prince or him, the New York Times is like, we have any way of laundering any far right figure you can imagine.
You'd think people would have learned their lesson.
Thanks, New York Times. Thank you.
From like that spate of embarrassing press that happened around Richard Spencer last year, but no.
Nope. And God, that was embarrassing. You're calling from a 202 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
What's going on, Michael? This is Nabil from Boston. How you guys doing?
Hey, Nabil. Good to hear from you. How's it going?
It's going excellent. Well, I have a question about Christopher Hitchens, actually.
Okay.
Done a really good job of breaking down the kind of odious and ahistorical analysis that Sam Harris has of Islam and his kind of flirtation with neoconservatism.
Yep.
I was wondering if you could do the same for Hitchens, though, because he obviously was much more historically minded, much more intelligent about this stuff, but he still made the same sort of mistakes. So I was hoping you could kind of break that down.
Well, Hitchens is a little bit more complicated because I remember even a one interview he did close to before he died on some it might have even been like at some bizarre right-wing show, and they were talking about Israel-Palestine, and Hitchens was he was rolling on defending the invasion of Iraq and all of this monstrous foreign policy. And then at one point when they were talking about Israel-Palestine, Hitchens wasn't as aggressive, but he literally said, he's like, look, I can't unlearn history, to paraphrase him. And his point was like, I still oppose the occupation. Like, you can't completely divorce me from any political or historical awareness. I think, though, that he was also, he was a guy that really seemed to be, the world was like a proxy for his social circles and personal arguments and vendettas. So if you read his initial exchanges after September 11th with people like Noam Chomsky, some of the things he says are, I get their appeal. They made sense. Obviously a phenomenon like Al-Qaeda is not simply reducible to U.S. foreign policy. There's other factors. There's also nothing. This is the opposite of the 80s. There's nothing. These are not the Sandinistas. These are, far right-wing religious fanatics that are cruel to everybody that isn't inside an incredibly small group, right? But to me, it seemed like a career opportunity. It seemed like it was about scoring. Like if you read his book, his autobiography, it's like
Hitch 22.
Yeah, I don't think Hitch 22 is there's almost no mention of Paul Bremer or the Iraq Provisional Authority. It's almost like he's historical, but he turned the world if Harris does his thought experiments and Hitchens turned the world into a dinner party, and it was all about scoring arguments in a dinner party. I also wonder from reading, if I remember, I haven't read him in a while, but I also think there was some misplaced Trotskyism there, as he kind of deluded himself into the idea that I'm still a guy who's about global revolution and uprisings across the globe. It's just that now the U.S. Marine Corps is the armed ring of those insurgencies, which is...
And that factors into the Kurds thing.
Right. And that's why he could always find... And I agree. Of course, I also have utmost sympathy and support for the Kurds, but he was very into... And he usually would be very eloquent because who else knew? Because he could find... idiot leftists who still sometimes do it, where they minimize or justify oppression and killing of the Kurds, or, all the idiot centrists were dazzled because they don't even know what Kurds are, and people on the right are always willing to, especially during the Bush era, they cynically used the human rights of Afghan women, Kurds, and the idea of Iraqi democracy. And unfortunately, he was obviously the most effective. I mean, just like Tony Blair was the most effective global propagandist and liar as a politician, Hitch at the end of the day was, I have no doubt there are plenty of impressionable young people who wouldn't have gone the wrong way on things like invading Iraq if they weren't reading him. For
sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch some of his clips when he was in his socialist phase. I mean, how scathing and really just on target he was almost all the time. I still think there was a lot of that social climbing aspect to him, and he still was playing that game, but there was something different. I mean, he really tried to frame himself as like a George Orwell character. He said, I've always fought against totalitarianism even when I was a leftist, so he tried to bridge that gap, and it was always was very forced, very contrived. Didn't make sense, but just the juxtaposition between his earlier self to like that kind of sweaty sausage look he always had, just complaining about Islam later on. It's just it's a crazy
depressing. It's depressing. I remember thing I think of, I remember one of the last profiles I read of him, the journalist spent the day with him drinking, because the dude was also just like a drunk.
You hear a lot of those stories.
Like, and the guy spent the day with him
complete
drinking.
Drunk.
Yeah, they spent the day with him drinking, and he said, of course, like there's a lot of flashes of like wit and charisma and everything, but I don't remember how he set it up, but it was sort of just like, perhaps Hitch has turned into like the worst case scenario possible. He's just become a bore, and I think like like.
Yeah, if you look at Hitchens in the 80s on like C-SPAN.
Oh, that's amazing.
It's very interesting, but you can tell. But he also has a huge appetite for engaging with like Buckley and other like right wingers, right? Like
definitely.
He loved that sort of thing.
Yes, he did. But he also really knew how to savage them.
Yeah, he did.
All right, thanks for the call. You're calling from a 225 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from? Hello, 225. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, this is Zachary from Baton Rouge.
Hey, what's going on, Zachary? What's on your mind?
Hi, I just wanted to bring some awareness to an upcoming constitutional amendment ballot on the election coming up in November in Louisiana.
Okay, go ahead.
It's the Amendment 2, and Louisiana is currently one of two states, along with Oregon, that doesn't require a unanimous jury for convictions and felonies.
Wow.
And so the amendment is to change that to requiring a unanimous jury for felony convictions.
Okay.
And as you can probably imagine, this has like huge implications for overpopulations and over conviction in the state. So yeah, I mean,
how's it looking?
There aren't many elections. It's hard to say because there's not a lot of polling.
Okay.
And the elections aren't super popular because there's not a lot of competitive ones, but this is something that I think needs to, have wider awareness because it's super important.
Appreciate it, Zachary. That does sound super important. Thanks, man. Let's see. What? Oh, okay. Yeah, let's do this. Trump has a vision of himself, and it's a painting. It's sort of like the dogs playing poker of American presidents. This was caught. Someone took a shot of this during his 60 Minutes meltdown with Leslie Stahl. And this is a painting that apparently he has hung in somewhere in the Oval Office. I don't know what room they're in. And it is of the Republican presidents. And they're sitting at some kind of poker table. I really like I have to say, because it's all of them. Eisenhower's next to Trump. Teddy Roosevelt's looking over his shoulder. Ford's looking very cool. He's almost looking like James Caan in the background.
There's a few missing from the Gilded Age, I feel like.
I'm sure there's a few missing from the Gilded
Ulysses
Age.
Grant isn't there, I don't think.
But it's the heavy hitters. It's Eisenhower. It's the new guys and the heavy hitters.
Where's Andrew Jackson?
Andrew Jackson was a Democrat.
Jackson was Democrat.
He was with him in spirit, though.
He's literally in the Democrat painting.
Yeah, he's in the Democrat painting.
Of course, of course.
So what I will say here is, okay, let's take this by tiers. I think Reagan was, more charming and good stuff on arms control, but he was a far-right white supremacist entertainer. So
who would have the most racist jokes, like the quantity? Probably Reagan, right?
Probably Reagan. Reagan was like, well, that reminds me of how do you tell a black burglar? And then Trump would have this guy. So
who likes Trump the most and who likes him the least here?
Well, no, this is the point I'm trying to work up to, though, because let's take Reagan and then let's just throw both the Bushes in, whatever, fuck them. And then Nixon is his own weird arch criminal sociopath. Teddy Roosevelt, imperialist and so on, but I don't think he'd like what Trump is doing for like the environment and factories.
He'd be okay with the ICE stuff.
He'd be totally into the ICE stuff.
He'd be like, you need to be harder on Bezos.
Now I have to say, and again, I already can anticipate the annoying SJW IMs. So I understand that Lincoln was far from perfect. Blah blah blah.
As far as presidents go,
I find the idea of Lincoln grinning across from Trump to be like actually profoundly offensive.
I agree.
Like just the like not only politically, like if you read about Lincoln, he was a ultra poor, self-made intellectual attorney who struggled with depression. Like he struggled with emotional issues that in modern terms would be a deep clinical depression, and had an incredible compassion and decency about him, but was also a very ruthless Machiavellian political player, which of course I mean as a compliment. And just the idea of him sitting across from Trump, and Trump's just like, and that was a great hotel, and we did that. By the way, that was in Springfield, Illinois. A lot of people don't talk about Springfield, Illinois. Just like Trump motor mouthing. Like, that's the one that actually does. I gotta admit, it just doesn't sit right with me. That's fucked up. That's not cool.
Yeah.
I think Nixon would absolutely hate Trump as well.
No, Nixon would definitely hate Trump, but Nixon can be just fine next to Trump. But I do think Nixon would be like, this guy doesn't shut up. Can we kill him? And I think Eisenhower just on military industrial complex speech alone is going to be like, Eisenhower would have voted for Clinton. Eisenhower would have been like, I'm a Republican my whole life, but Hillary Clinton's proven to me that she'll kill some goddamn Indonesians if need be, and she knows how to manage the country. Although she does want to put a little bit more in defense spending than I think is prudent.
Eisenhower would probably look like, do I want to be Clapper or do I want to be playing golf with Trump?
Right.
I think he probably could go the other way, actually.
You think he's Clapper or playing golf with Trump?
I think he could play golf with Trump.
I think it's
possible. But he wouldn't have liked that he draft dodged.
Yeah,
I don't think he'd be able to handle the diet that Trump's going with.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, he would not like the diet. That's true. So Lincoln, you could see Lincoln in his side profile. They literally drew him like his eyes are creased to be like, oh, Donald, that really was a tremendous idea you had for a casino with naked girls in Macau. You are a great president and doing a terrific job. Yeah, that's offensive. All right, here are the...
It's time for Republicans to stop taking the credit for Honest Abe, okay? Things have changed a lot since then.
Lincoln would not be a Republican today. I think we can quite safely
They have an appreciation of what the radical Republicans were.
Yeah, the radical Republicans were both something that we should have a sincere appreciation for and are not Republicans. Okay, here is the Obama. And this is another funny juxtaposition because Andrew Jackson is across Obama.
And he looks puzzled at Obama.
And he looks like, why is this Negro playing billiards with us? Don't tell me. Wait, was he the gay Indonesian that I read about in Newsmax in the time capsule they gave me?
I don't trust him with that pool cue.
Was he the gay one from the Mohammedan hinterlands who paid a choir boy to give him oral sex in a limousine, as I have read in Breitbart?
Obama sees Woodrow Wilson and Andrew Jackson talking amongst themselves across the room.
They're just like, fuck. It's one thing to say arc of history and abstraction, but goddamn.
Woodrow hasn't even said hi.
Yeah. Woodrow won't shake my hand. We're supposed to be all presidents thing.
Meanwhile, LBJ can't stop giving me back rubs.
Yeah. Meanwhile, LBJ wants me to go to the toilet with him. It's weird. And Bill Clinton's just like, everybody loves me.
We have
I'm more Andrew Jackson than Andrew Jackson and more Barack than Barack.
I like that FDR is one of the few standing, too. Or he's not one of the ones sitting.
Oh, no, he is sitting.
No, FDR's sitting.
That's Wilson you're looking at.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Wilson
They're
and
looking
FDR kind of
almost exactly
It
alike.
is funny, and JFK is just sort of like, wow, old Hickory, he's a crazy motherfucker.
That guy gave.
Is he going to use the N-word next?
Look at JFK's little rear end there. I think Andy Thomas spent a little time on that.
He's got the back brace on too.
Like Andrew Jackson's like, next thing you know, this friggin' Pope worshiper next to me and the Muslim are gonna get together. I don't belong in this picture. Where's the one with the marmalade face who owns casinos? Okay, yes.
Now this is a painting of Nixon at the Nixon Library.
This is a very weird. I don't even want to go where I'm going at this.
It's called Nixon at Andow. Yeah, I don't like where that kid's placed. But anyway,
that is a very
this is the caption here. Nixon at Andow. In the fall of 1956, the Soviet Union brutally suppressed an anti-community revolution in Hungary. At Christmas time, President Eisenhower sent his young Vice President Richard Nixon on a goodwill mission to build sympathy for over 100,000.
Imagine the fucking drag. You've just had an uprising crushed by Soviet tanks, and that guy
Nixon
shows
comes
up.
in.
They were anti-capitalist still.
Oh yeah.
In that revolution.
Yes,
P.S.
they were. And Nixon's like, I mean, that's the interesting thing about Nixon. He was heterodox with regards to internationalism, compared to certain. That strain of the Republican Party is
China.
After official meetings at the dinner in his honor, Nixon broke away from the constraints of protocol and returned to see what conditions were really like in the camps. He stayed up all night. I mean, I don't know how true this is. He stayed up all night, riding in a hay wagon pulled by a tractor as he accompanied the freedom fighters on their rounds through the countryside to search for others who had escaped the Soviet crackdown. Now, I would just say, and I don't know much about this revolution, but if freedom riders are showing you around at night on a hayride, you're probably maybe not getting the full story. I don't know.
Maybe not.
But whatever.
Maybe not the full deal. All right. There is a very aggressive voter suppression happening in Georgia. And it's happening because that's what Republicans do, from North Dakota to North Carolina to Georgia, obviously, to Texas. It's happening because the Roberts Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act and Congress never reauthorized it. But the aggressiveness and the pace that Secretary of State Brian Kemp, who oversees voting in the state and who is the Republican nominee for governor, is going about this is because Stacey Abrams is running an incredibly impressive campaign, and she could absolutely win, making history and resetting the direction of Georgia and the broader South, as well as, I would argue, the Democratic Party. Black voters matter. Are going out and overcoming and dealing with the voter suppression specifically. We have some footage here of Black Vote Matters activists. And this is actually the bus of seniors that was blocked from voting. Is that the tape we have?
This is footage from that day and when they were stopped.
Okay, so they took, and actually Noah explained this last night on TMBS, they took a bus of 40 senior citizens to go vote. This bus was stopped for absolutely no reason, and this gives you a real sense of precisely what's happening there.
Good morning, how you doing?
Black Voters Matter bus rolling into Louisville in Jefferson County, Georgia. Great day, an incredible gathering with some of the seniors at the center.
We had an amazing nonpartisan rally this morning.
We gotta have record numbers. We need y'all to get everybody in your family to the polls to send a message that we ain't going back. Right? That you can't keep messing with our vote. And every time you mess with our vote, a little more mad with it. And every time we get mad, we got 5 more folks we coming with.
We were going out so that the seniors could see the bus. And many of them wanted to ride the bus.
They were fired up, high energy, excited to go spread the word to their folks, excited to go vote, literally out here dancing and having a party in front of the senior center, getting on the bus to go vote at the polling place. Everybody excited to go vote.
Someone had passed by and saw the seniors getting on the bus and called the county commissioner's office to tell them that we can't do that. Now, there's no law that says that black folk can't ride on buses no more.
So the bad news is that they're going to make us get off the bus right now, and that's okay, because y'all still going to make it do what it do.
So they're so mad and low down that we getting jealous. That's right. But they can't stop the rain. That's right. You can't stop whatever God got. We still going down there to vote. That's right. Still going to vote.
They're going to vote. Anoa explained this. These people are voting, in fact. She knows about this. But yes, that is a perfect example. Like, that's what they're doing. And that's what...
sorry, I forget. Do we know who called the police?
I guess they don't know.
Jeez.
That person, whoever did, should definitely be identified and talked about. I'd really like to hear their
given a nickname.
Yeah, I'd like given many, many nicknames. Many, many nicknames.
Police Patty.
You're calling from a 313 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hello.
Is it 313?
313.
Hi. Yeah, sorry, I've never called in before, so I'm just a little confused.
It's okay. What's up?
Yeah, I was thinking about sort of the so someone called in before about the sort of gun culture. Like I was paying attention to your show a couple of weeks ago. Someone called in about the redneck revolt people and how they and the guy was really sort of putting it, I think, in a really sort of fantastical kind of light. When I mean they do sort of, they are sort of more about sort of protecting communities rather than kind of, and sort of taking people to people who are susceptible to a more kind of like white supremacy to a more like socialist politics and sort of organizing communities of mutual aid. And so with the recent kind of really terrifying rise of kind of I think with like the fascists in Brazil, mm-hmm. and the even the stuff. Sorry, I'm kind of nervous.
It's okay, man. Take your time.
I've been
Go ahead. That's okay. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the thing with Brazil, and I don't know if you heard the David Duke, the KKK Grand Wizard criminal.
Yes.
He actually endorsed.
He endorsed Bolsonaro. Yes. And I also so absolutely. Yep. Of course.
And there's a lot of kind of like you see these gangs and they are like beating up people and like I mean in just a few days ago with in NYC and then in Portland and I mean they're they're all like congregating. So I'm just like I have a very scary kind of feeling about what I mean. We talk about and just what can we do for kind of Brazil and not only just Brazil and just kind of I mean we always hear imperial alarm bells go off when there's a country that is like not complying with American interests, be that a bad country or like with
I hear you.
Whatever.
So you're saying. So are you saying? I'm just trying to summarize a little bit. So you're kind of saying like, hey, I think there was a guy a couple weeks ago who called with some kind of like fantasy revolution scenario
that you'd have be able to buy enough guns to have an offensive revolution.
Right. That's ridiculous, obviously. But if you're saying that, I think I've said many times before that there are groups in this country, like black people as an example. If you want to like own guns, I don't have any. I'm not really more broadly. I'm interested in a gun control conversation that has to do with how you would actually seriously regulate the gun industry. I'm not, and And I don't know, maybe there is a gun culture. There probably is. There's obviously, we played that Bernie Bernstein guy a couple months ago. There's obviously people with really sick, bizarre, twisted relationships with guns. There's also people like, Jesus, even where I grew up, there's people who hunt, have shotguns, have pickup trucks. It's really not such a big deal or radical thing. And I don't know what it gets you, to be honest. Like, I don't think that people like you are not going to be protected from any type of police power in
the
this
event
country.
You need that.
In the event you need that, we're done. But on the other hand, I think more broadly, if people want to have some sense of like a culture in the left of like, whether it's having guns or even just like physically conditioning and self-defense, I think that's actually probably a good idea.
Yeah.
Although I wouldn't encourage some of the melodrama of it too, because I think that we can also like let some of these groups like tell on themselves and go away. I think we also shouldn't like the people who run the like Chris Kobach is still an infinitely bigger deal than Gavin McInnes and has infinitely more power and infinitely more influence. So like also don't get lost in the melodrama of these groups either, and don't play that game.
I was going to say, like, if there are people out there who are already inclined towards a gun culture or towards violent altercations, I would rather have them be on our side than on their side. And, like, maybe it's not the most important thing. Like, I think it's good that people show up to counter-protest the Proud Boys and Gavin and stuff. But, like, you should be prepared for what might happen. And like, honestly, take a self-defense class because they're not fucking around, the Proud Boys, and you need to roll deep and you need to know how to fight. And like, if you don't want that to happen, you can do lots and lots of other things. Like, we have a diversity of tactics on the left, but in terms of self-defense, like, I think it is important. Like, I'm for responsible gun control laws, but like things like the Socialist Rifle Association, Redneck Revolt, like, things are going to happen fast when they start happening. So
I'm not opposed at all to people doing stuff like that. I think it's actually a good idea. I do. And at the same time, I think that I also think I do think that people, these groups, relative to who actually and to the extent they're connected to who runs the country, we can use that to toxify their brands. But as I say, Chris Kobach is a infinitely more important figure and influential in all of our lives than Gavin McInnes. And a part of me does think that some element of this can just be like, go ahead, do your bullshit. We're going to ignore you and you're going to evaporate because it's not, that part is not as long-term as the part that's literally running things.
Yeah.
And then also police and literal like state security agencies that might have white supremacists working in them that are carrying out white supremacist policies.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say too. Like, even more disturbing than the fact that there are violent fascist street gangs is the fact that the cops are on their side in a lot of these scenarios because the cops are the violent arm of the state and they're backed by state power.
Yeah, I grew up around guns and technically have a couple to my name.
Right.
And if I lived in, probably the middle of the country, I might have one in my household. At the same time, I would caution that statistically you're more likely to injure yourself or someone you love.
That's the truth.
Than stop fascists from invading your house.
Yeah, I would actually say, like, I actually think that is the part, right. That's really to caution against. Don't go in with like a corollary of their like melodrama and delusions of grandeur about what guns give you in terms of power. Like, guns mostly just end up harming the people that own them. You're calling from a 651 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello? Sorry, am I on?
Yes, 651. Are you there?
Hi. Yeah, this is Mariana from the Minneapolis-St. Paul area.
Hey, Mariana. How you doing?
Hi, good. I have two quick points, but I'll just try to do the first one because it's more relevant to what the interview was about today.
Okay.
It's actually not directly about ICE, but
okay.
I have a lot of connections, I guess, to the kind of immigrant community in that my mom is a social worker at an elementary school with like 38% or so Hispanic students. So there's a lot of undocumented families that are pretty new to the area. And the past few years, there's been a lot of concerns with, obviously, deportations and ICE. I would like to just let people know that, yes, ICE is definitely tracking people, like, outside public buildings and by their own homes. For example, a few days ago, maybe like a week ago, there's a father that was deported after walking out of his own house because they were tracking where he lived. And it is a worrisome time. And if people feel really powerless, even with the immigrant stuff, yes, we need to abolish ICE 100%, but there's a lot of ways you can directly help. I know a lot of local church communities, if you're part of a church, have programs where you can donate clothing and food. Same with public schools. Like my mom helps a lot of these families go to Goodwill or whatever and get clothing for the winter or furniture. So just if there's like local libraries, schools, something like that, and you ask human resources or cultural advocates how to help, there's always a ton of stuff you can do.
Mariana, thank you so much for that call.
Yeah.
It's okay, real quick, because I'm getting the signal. We have a couple of minutes here, but yes, one more thing. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Also, if anyone's going to Minneapolis Chapo tomorrow, if me and DJ Danarchy and some other people are probably going to be there, so you can just, if you're part of the TMBS Discord, there's just at Minnesota as a command, and we can try to meet up or something.
Cool. Awesome. Represent TMBS Discord. Love it. Thanks, Mariana.
The current Chapo tour is very good. I went when they were in New York. It was awesome.
I believe that. I'm holding out for my Ahmadinejad interview. New Human, did Matt say he was doing a George Carlin-style history podcast? This and Dennis Miller moving left. 80s comedy renaissance underway.
Oh, who's the guy?
Dave Carlin. Dan Carlin.
Dan Carlin.
Oh, I was going to say, I was a little confused. So I was imagining.
It's the 7 words you can't say in colonial Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Vacuum decilium.
Yeah. Cunt, I get. It sounds rough. All right. Let's see.
George Dan Carlin.
George Dan Carlin. It would make Carlin a lot more interesting. Hardcore fucking history. That's Joe Rogan. No, I guess I
don't like either of their politics that much, to be honest.
George Carlin?
I will
George
defend
Carlin's
George
Carlin.
Carlin.
Better than Dan Carlin.
No, I thought I saw some George Carlin signed up sets where I wasn't.
Like he has become a favorite among like the free speech edgelords. I know he's dead, but like there are certain bits of his that there's really no way to interpret it in a right wing way.
Seems a bit misanthropic, is all.
Well, certainly.
Sure. He's a comedian.
He's a comedian, yeah.
Jesus Christ, man.
Not all comedians are like that.
Oh, my God. Just look at the Maoist thought control police over here we got from Matt. Like, yeah, he's a
I don't know. I think people will agree with me on some of this.
Well, I'm sure people will agree with you on some of this, as they will agree with literally anything on some of this. Some will agree on anything. Hey, crew, this past weekend I attended the Talladega NASCAR race. I camped on the infield. I don't like racing, and I've never been to Alabama, but I was not surprised a bit when I saw Trump, Confederate flags, as well as endless troop appreciation. I wore my Bernie T-shirt one night and received many long, dumb glares. Debated a few idiots and even got accused of being an Antifa super soldier. LOL, can we please beat these fuckers? Yes, we can.
You're doing the Lord's work.
Matthias, hey guys. Have you been following Peter Dow? He's been having surprisingly good takes this past month, such as calling for a general strike in response to Kavanaugh being seated, and generally being willing to move left to unify the party. If you have an opinion on him, do you think this is a genuine shift in his opinions, or just the first Clinton operative to see where the wind is blowing, where the energy is in the party?
Who cares?
I don't care. Whatever. Welcome to the party.
Anyone who's willing to support a general strike, welcome to the real resistance.
Let's see.
Do we want to talk about Francis Fukuyama?
We only have literally 2 minutes. What do you say?
Franz Fukuyama in the New Statesman said socialism ought to come back, and Marx, certainly Karl Marx said a lot of true things. And Papademos says, Sir Mix-a-Lot, I've probably underrated small butts.
Perfect analogy.
Oh, that's perfect. Militant apathy. Jamie's right. Police are the tip of the spear of white supremacy. Lots of Klan, Proud Boys, alt-right folks throughout the police departments and everywhere. No doubt. And also, what's up with Shmuley Botek? Well, he's an asshole. Black Marxist. Where does Michael get his Einsteinian knowledge of foreign policy? What do you think of the epidemic of kids living with their parents in their 20s? What? I don't know anything. Well, that's the economy. The economy is why. A Saudi boomer. MBS would already have this under wraps if he had put down his fucking phone.
Millennial bin Salman.
Okay, and let's see. Okay, Sean, the debate looked like the Penguin debating Bruce Wayne. Okay, the final... That's like terrifyingly true. All right, let me see. The final I am the day. I will remind you that Beto has said that he will vote for Bernie's Medicare for All bill if he's in the Senate. He may be a centrist, but he's a centrist, but he may be a centrist, but he's a centrist that would vote for the most important piece of legislation in the last 50 years. That said, I watched the debate last night, and I was fairly underwhelmed by Beto. He needs to go figure out a better way of showing that Cruz is actually a soulless lizard, subhuman, inhuman, and no one talks like Cruz talks. The only people happy to vote for him have probably murdered at least 4 people.
Might be a lot of those in Texas.
Right. Huey Lewis line is from Changes. Sam is here tomorrow, Friday, and I'll see you next week.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar, but finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,